Hello, everyone. I'm sure had Donald Trump actually bothered to read what people of Ukraine think about him, he would take issue with this headline from Kyiv Post: "Failed peace, the Trump bid to end the Russia-Ukraine war fast ends in shambles." But for the rest of us, let's be happy that somebody is calling it like it is. Let's just be grateful for that. And who better than people who are actually having to deal with this crap? The offhand remarks by Marco Rubio, "This is not our war," and by J.D. Vance, who basically expressed frustration with Ukrainians as to why they're kicking up such a fuss over a few miles of territory, despite the fact that the territory in question is roughly the size of Pennsylvania. So we know what's going on. The U.S. is staging its own departure from Russian-Ukrainian affairs. And Ukraine is moving ahead on its own, working with the European allies. Of course, what it means in the immediate future is more losses for Ukraine. There is an article in The Guardian talking about volunteers for the army. So right now, Ukrainian military is doing its best to not allow really young men to sign up. So not allow the 16 and 17-year-olds to sneak in. But it is getting harder. The boy in the article is 20. He is signing up because his brother was killed. So he sees this as the rite of passage, as his duty to step in and take up the defense of his country. He's 20. In the US, he wouldn't even be old enough to drink. Sadly, he's not alone. His brother was 22 when he was killed in the Bakhmut offensive. And that's one of the many things that cannot be fixed for Ukraine, even if everybody pitched in right now and kicked Russia out. We have lost an entire generation of young people in this war. We have lost an entire generation of children who grew up during this war and who have not been to school not under the Russian missiles ever. They don't know what it's like to not have air raids. Yes, there is the physical destruction that is unquestionable. There is a loss of priceless historic architectural sites and artifacts. Yes, that all is important and it is irreplaceable. But what is also lost is the mental health and the youth of an entire nation, because somebody in Kremlin had an itch they had to scratch. There's a good article on the NBC site talking about Crimea. And I'm sure a lot of people had that question, like, what is the big deal? It's just this tiny peninsula. Why it is important. So this article breaks it down very nicely, and I strongly recommend it, especially if you are interested in history and politics. It talks about some of the history of Crimea. It talks about how it ended up with Ukraine, and it talks about why it's one of the crucial items when it comes to the war between Russia and Ukraine. So, as I mentioned yesterday, one of the arguments that Putin is making is that it is a cradle of Russian spirituality. So, again, my question to them, why do you have to own it? Go visit. That doesn't give you the right to own something because you think it is the cradle of your spirituality. So no, that is not a good enough excuse. There are religious centers all over the world that people hold in high regard for themselves. If they happen to be in another country, they go and visit. If they can't visit, they watch it on TV. But we do not get up and invade Mecca or the Vatican. Period. So that is an extremely bogus bullshit excuse. Ever since Crimea was invaded back in 2014, Russia turned this beautiful tropical peninsula full of fascinating historic sites and fun places to visit and vacation at into a military base. They have destroyed everything there. They have destroyed the beaches, they have destroyed the exotic gardens, and so on and so forth. And they had held the gunpoint referendum to supposedly prove that people of Crimea wanted it that way. That, of course, is bullshit. So, since Russia insisted on turning it into a military base, Ukraine has been treating it as such and reacting accordingly. Putin's favorite construction project, Kerch Bridge, continues to be a very vulnerable point. And despite Russia's domination of Crimea, Ukraine still managed to beat Russian Black Sea fleet out of the Black Sea. And then there is this, once again, does everybody remember that this is still happening? So you would think if somebody was serious about peace talks, they would stop murdering civilians while the talks continued. But no, nothing stopped. This is still going on. So the Guardian numbers are actually outdated. So they started with this horrific attack on Kharkiv, injuring 46. That has gone up and we now have a death toll. We're up to 61 injured and 5 killed. And again, what kind of a completely underhanded bastard do you have to be to go and bomb civilians in the middle of the night? There were 2 children among the wounded, and one of the people killed was one of the administration officials there. There were also 4 people killed and 8 others injured in the Donetsk region. And 2 more people were wounded in Sumy. Why does anyone listen to what Russia says instead of paying attention to what it does? Because that should be the material point. Russia is not walking the walk. They show nothing. Nothing about their actions suggests that they want to end this war. So why would anybody believe them? More to come.